It's good to be back, and it's much better to be up here without being sick. Last time I was actually I was going in and out of it. But yeah, welcome to the first Sunday of 2026. That's so wild. I feel like 2025 went by really quick, and I'm honored to be teaching on the first Sunday. Um, but as always, good morning. I very much welcome feedback, both constructive and encouraging. If you have any questions, please come talk to me after. I'm more than willing to discuss anything with you guys. But today, it's going to be a great day. Today's got a great message. I'm very excited to teach upon this. But also, we're going to start with a little bit of a quiz. It is this, all right? Does anyone know, I'm just going to have one volunteer, know all four lobes on this brain here? All right, okay. You're welcome. Yeah.
Frontal,
Okay.
occipital, and
Which one's the occipital? What color is occipital?
Okay, red frontal, the blue is occipital.
Okay.
The bottom one is temporal.
Nice.
And the top is parietal.
Good, nice, good job. All right, so why I have this up here, okay, so the occipital lobe, this is a little bit of like a biology class here, but the occipital lobe is in charge of, I believe it is eyesight, right? Yeah, it is vision. Temporal has memory, hearing. The parietal is for, I want to say sensory, and the frontal is decision making. And I'm not joking when I say this, or a little bit of a joke, but this is what the male brain looks like before the age of 25. Before the age of 25. Because, so, okay, guys. No. Approximately. Okay, no. So, I'm sure we've all heard that the male brain develops a little bit slower than the female brain. And that's a little, okay, shocker. No, okay. However, that fact is a little bit more nuanced. Actually, for girls, the brain does develop quicker around the ages when they're teenage years, but the actual timing of both of our brains, both female and male, fully developing is both around the age of 25. So it's a little bit of like, you guys just have a head start, but on average, girls' brains do develop like around 6 months earlier, completely the frontal lobe, where their decision making does fully develop. I put this here because, as some of you guys know, I turned 25 last October, and I have this. I keep on doing this thing and pretending I feel young. Okay, even before I turned 25 and 24, I still felt like at some degree I was still 18, I was still about to go to college. But I'm not joking when I say this. Between the dates, December 17th and December, I want to say 21st, I physically felt something change. I want to say my frontal lobe fully developed in that week. It's not a drastic change. I'm just as cringe, just as probably immature. But there are things I think about things more. I'm using my brain a little bit more. And there's things I think about and prioritize more. And I feel like one thing that really catalyzed it is I went to one of my closest and earliest friends' wedding. I met this guy when I was, I want to say 8 months old. And he's a year and a half older than me. And I saw him get married. And I'm just sitting there thinking dude, life is progressing very fast. What is happening right now? And I felt dude, I think I've mellowed out a little bit, just watching him get married. It was really great. It's a great wedding. But all that to say, after my brain fully developed, I now understand why women overthink. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Hey, you take your wins, you take your losses, okay? All right. Okay, but ultimately, this got me thinking a little bit more too. When I was preparing this message over the past 2 weeks, I was wondering what is the point of having someone like me or Alicia or Clayton come up here to teach. Like, there are much better preachers and messages on YouTube that we can honestly just play in this class. And I feel like they're more eloquent, they're more rhetorical, they're better messages. Like, what's the point of having me come up here? And I feel like there are two, I've narrowed it down to 2 reasons. The first reason is there's a benefit for me. I feel like we can all agree that when we're able to teach something, that just means we understand it a little bit deeper, right, than just hearing someone teach to you. So there's a benefit for me in studying whatever the message is and presenting it on a Sunday to you guys. But for you guys, and for when I'm in the crowd listening to someone else, there's a benefit in seeing someone of our age come up here, and it's someone that we can relate to, someone that we can see in our lives. It's how we build community. I'm not necessarily coming up to be like a model for you guys. I try to be, but I'm also obviously just the same as you guys. I'm a sinner. I'm just the same age. I'm not wiser. I'm not more intelligent, whatever. But there's benefit in seeing one of us, one of our own, coming up here and teaching the message. So what you guys ultimately learn and what you guys ultimately believe is not because of the quality or the authority of the speaker on stage. You believe because what you hear, you believe and find to be true. You're not believing because of the label that I have. You believe because you trust that the content of what you're hearing, through your own decision making, through your own thinking, you believe what you hear, you find what you believe to be true, and that's what you accept. All right, so we're in Matthew. I love this book. And does anyone remember the key word of Matthew? It's been a couple weeks. Does anyone remember? Osis remembers.
Kingdom.
It is correct. It is kingdom. Today we are in Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16, and I've titled it "Stay Salty." All right. Have to. Okay. All right. We're gonna do a little bit of a recall of what we learned the first time when I was up here. Does anyone remember the author of Matthew? It's Matthew. Does anyone remember his like nickname, like the other name that he has? He's a tax collector. Do you remember his like other name? Correct. I don't know who said it, but Levi. Very good. Bonus points to you. Do you remember the audience?
Jews.
Yes, primarily Jewish Christians and Jews. And then the purpose of the book of Matthew, this one might be a little bit hard to remember, but is to show that Jesus is the promised Messiah. All right, and today being in Matthew 5, there's a little bit more context to this, and I want to start off with that. So Matthew, chapters 5 through 7 in Matthew are known famously as the Sermon on the Mount. This is early in Jesus' ministry. The famous Beatitudes that differentiate between the worldly and godly traits are the opening verses of this sermon as well. In the previous chapter, so Matthew chapter 4, Jesus had just been tempted. He had just begun his ministry. He got his first few disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, and he began to start publicly doing his ministry. He started healing, exorcising demons, and garnering attention in crowds. So for the Sermon on the Mount, specifically, chapters 5 through 7, the direct primary audience at the time for Jesus was the disciples. It says that he left the crowds that people had come to watch Jesus heal. He went up onto this mountain, which I'm going to get back to, and he teaches to the disciples. Now, there probably are still crowds listening in on the sermon, but his primary direct audience is his disciples. And the purpose of the sermon is to define what godly righteousness truly is. So he's not there to garner more attention. He's not there to try to impress anyone. He's there to truly build disciples. Okay, so this is what the Sermon on the Mount is for. So this little bit of a fun fact, it's not a mountain actually. Where Jesus preached geographically is actually on a hill. It says it's a gentle hill overlooking the Sea of Galilee, now known as the Mount of Beatitudes. This isn't a mistake why it's called the Sermon on the Mount, because the author Matthew purposely did this to build a parallel to Moses going up Mount Sinai, when he had gotten the Ten Commandments. I can honestly nerd out about this, but for the sake of the sermon, I'm not going to. But if anyone is interested in learning the parallels, come talk to me after. All right? This is the structure of the Sermon on the Mount. Verses 1 through 2 are the Beatitudes. 13 through 16, the focus of today's message is salt and light. 17 through 48 is true righteousness, into piety, into allegiance, into decisions and warnings. So what this is ultimately doing is it's a progression, okay? It's a discourse. Jesus first identifies what should be the Christian identity, what makes us Christians, what our mission is, what are the ethics of being Christians. It's actually very interesting. How we devote ourselves to God, how we declare our allegiance to God, and ultimately what we do with it, okay? So it's very, very sound, very, very well structured, and of course, this is Jesus speaking, so duh. But I kind of want to set the stage a little bit further, okay? I want you guys to see how many people on the next slide you recognize. Who's this guy? Paul Washer, correct. This guy? Nice, John Piper, okay. This one, Alicia's favorite. I don't know if it's her favorite, but I know she likes him. John MacArthur, I like him too. Tim Keller, Dr. Stephen Manley, one of my personal favorites. Does anyone know this guy? This is a titan. This is Charles Spurgeon. This is a titan in Christian theology. This one's more famous. Billy Graham, nice. Does anyone know this guy? I would be pretty impressed. This is Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones. I'll be quoting him a little bit today. This guy is another author called A.W. Tozer. Now, you guys don't know who this guy is, but for me personally, this is one of, in my life, who I've actually personally heard speak, one of the, I would say top 3, maybe top 2 pastors I've ever heard. His name is Larry Lynn. And the way he preaches and his structure of preaching, his style, his mannerisms, a lot of it has been impressed into me. I feel like there's a lot of things that I learned from, a lot of things that I take from his style of teaching. And if anyone's curious, you can all his sermons are on his YouTube, and it's also on my college church's website. So if you do hear him teach, you'd be like, oh, that's why Jonathan does this or does that. But in your own minds, maybe there are people up here, picture the best preacher you've ever listened to, right? And maybe he's up here. Maybe it's that guy, right? I'm kidding. But honestly, even if I dedicate the rest of my life to teaching and preaching, I would never belong in this rank amongst these people. That's me. but yeah, I'm taking myself out. No, it's okay. But all these guys pale in comparison to this preacher. Okay. I want you guys to really think about this. This is Jesus preaching. Yes, the Bible, we're familiar with it. We know what it is. This is about Jesus. The entire Bible is pointing to Christ. But I want us to understand in Matthew 5, this is the first written record in the New Testament, and chronologically in the Bible, that Jesus himself, through his mouth and tongue, is preaching. This is his sermon. If you remember from, I think 3 weeks ago when I was teaching about Follow Me, who the me was in Follow Me, we have to remember this is the Messiah. This is the prophesied one. This is the true son of Adam, the true Israel, the true king. This is who is giving a sermon right now. So I want to put that into perspective. All the people that I had on this slide just now, those guys are all eloquent. They're all great speakers. But this is the guy who they all preach about. And this is the guy preaching. It's like you have your favorite preacher, and this is your favorite preacher's favorite preacher. All right? This is Jesus. So hope that sets the stage. I'm going to read a quote. Or actually, this is a preface to a commentary about the Sermon on the Mount. And it goes as this. The Sermon on the Mount has a unique fascination. It seems to present the quintessence of the teaching of Jesus. It makes goodness attractive. It shames our shabby performance. It engenders dreams of a better world. John Donne put it in a sermon preached during Lent 1629. Not without a little pardonable hyperbole, all the articles of our religion, all the canons of our church, All the injunctions of our princes, all the homilies of our fathers, all the body of divinity is in these 3 chapters, is this in this one Sermon on the Mount. And then the quote goes further. It's not up here, but I'm going to read it. I have to confess that I have myself fallen under its spell, or rather under the spell of him who preached it. Okay, and then we'll skip a little bit. I believe he meant his Sermon on the Mount to be obeyed. Indeed, if the church realistically accepted his standards and values as here set forth and lived by them, it would be the alternative society he always intended it to be and would offer to the world an authentic Christian counterculture. So, guys, be excited. Salt and light, Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16. I'm going to have it up here. You guys can turn to your Bibles, but please, for the sake of my voice, read along with me. All right. 3, 2, 1, begin. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. All right. The first point I want to bring up. You are the salt of the earth. That is what verse 13 says. You are the light of the world. That is what verse 14 says. It does not say you must become the salt of the earth. It does not say you must become the light of the world. It says you are. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. This is a big difference. There is nuance to this. The best way I can put it into an analogy is you aren't interviewing for the position of salt of the earth. You aren't preparing and filling out your resume for the position of light of the world. You already have the job. If you are a disciple of Christ and you believe yourself to be a believer, you already have the job. It's more a matter of whether you do your job or whether you do it effectively, and less a matter of if you have the job or not. Jesus is saying that by nature, through the work and power of the Holy Spirit and God's supernatural work in our own hearts, in our identity, in like species classification, we are completely different animals. We are a completely different species from the rest of the world. That in our encounter with Christ, that we are ultimately and permanently and radically transformed and wildly changed. In us encountering Christ, we have been permanently altered. We are now a new creation, as the Bible puts it, right? There's this quote that says, "There's much difference between you and the world because of the Holy Spirit dwelling in you, as there is between light and darkness and salt and the thing that salt is being poured on. And this is what I want you to see. The whole world is talking about all that we must do, but I want to talk to you today about all that we must be." That's from our great Paul Washer. So understand, we are already salt of the earth, light of the world. I think we all understand, like, historically and like in application in our own minds, like the importance of like light, right? There's electricity here, there's light here, so you guys can see each other, so you can study at night. I don't know what else, like, so that you're not driving in the darkness. It's pretty obvious why light is important. We're not called to just be like, actually, I'm going to rephrase that sentence. Light is important. However, like the characteristics of salt are a little bit more not as clear in this verse. Like I'm obviously gonna dive into it, but it's not as obvious as light is. But in the context of being light of the world, we're not called to just be like mirrors of God's light. I'm sure we've all heard that to some degree, like we're called to reflect God's glory. Yes. But in this context, in verses 13 through 16, in the context of being light of the world, we're not called to be mirrors or billboards pointing to God's light. Yes, we do that in function, but we are called to be sources of light ourselves. We are called to be light, like a candle in the darkness. We're not called to just be like a mirror mirroring another candle in the darkness, okay? But our light in function and in motivation should be ultimately pointing and glorifying Jesus, the ultimate and the perfect and unextinguishable light, okay? We're going to waver. There's going to be winds. Our candle might flicker in and out. That comes with being human, comes with being a sinner. But ultimately, we're called to be candles and being lit ourselves. As Clayton said like a couple months ago, stay lit, right? Okay, so let's talk about salt a little bit. So salt, on the other hand, we can think of its uses, right? It seasons our food. Although this is a white church. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Hey. I'm kidding. Okay. It is a condiment. It is a seasoning. Okay. But back then, in the ancient times, I'm not attacking anybody, guys. Just trying to make sure that you guys are listening, man. Like, right? Okay. No. In the ancient times, salt also had a very important purpose of preserving food. Obviously, there weren't refrigerators back then. It also had medicinal properties. So salt, unironically, allowed for early civilizations to survive and thrive because it was able to preserve meats, it was able to preserve fish, and allowed for storage of food in times of famine, in times of maybe like drought or whatever, right? So salt, in its function, and in the context of this verse, prevents rot and preserves, okay? Now, we are called to be salt of the earth, light of the world. The implied converse of Jesus' affirmations is also true. What does that mean? That means that the world is indeed a dark place, and it is also a place in need of salt to be poured on it. The world is continuously deteriorating. It literally cannot stop itself from going bad. So think of like a rotten banana, okay? But this banana has rotten so far that it can't even be used for banana bread anymore, okay? That's the world. And guess what? It still continues rotting. That is the world. As salt of the earth, we, the church, and disciples of Christ, we're put out into this world with a mission, with two purposes, with two goals. One, to stop the rotting, to stop the decay, or at least to some degree hinder it. And two, to dispel the darkness and light up as much space as we possibly can. Okay? So, hope that's encouraging. But I want to go back to the main verse. However, if we can lose our saltiness. How shall its saltiness be restored if it loses its taste? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled. For light, if we put it under a basket, it is rendered useless. So, salt is good for nothing if its saltiness is lost, and light is good for nothing if it is concealed. So that begs the question, how do we lose our saltiness? How do we conceal our light? So remember, the question at hand isn't whether or not you have the job or not. It's whether you do it properly and effectively. So in my understanding, it's been a while since I was in a chemistry class, AP Chem. I took Orgo in college. I also failed my first chemistry midterm ever in college, got a 36. That was a humbling experience. I suffered great imposter syndrome after that. But in my understanding, salt, the compound, sodium chloride, is a pretty stable compound. It's not like spontaneously combusting or denaturing on our dinner tables, right? It's not just like we don't know if there's a risk that it's not going to be salt when we pour it onto our food anymore. We might mistake it for sugar, but it's not going to, the inherent characteristics of salt is not going to change. So its property of being salty is innate. In my understanding, I'm like, okay, when have I ever had salt that was not salty. It's like, not ever? Like, I don't think so. So what does it mean when Jesus puts it that we can lose our saltiness? And I thought about this and read a bunch of commentaries, listened to a bunch of sermons, and I've narrowed it down to this. Salt can lose its saltiness if it is tainted, if it is mixed with lots of impurities, and with greater contamination of salt, it becomes less and less effective. So, if I mix salt with let's say like a teaspoon of salt with like a kilo of sugar, you're probably not going to taste the salt as much. In fact, for culinary people who know this, the salt actually makes the sugar taste more sweet. But anyways, the main point being that salt can lose its saltiness if it is mixed with impurities, okay? If it is mixed with the wrong chemicals, in fact, salt can actually even become dangerous, even though at its current state, it is stable, it is not reactive, but if it's mixed with the wrong substances, it can become dangerous. So what does that mean? We lose our saltiness when we become indistinguishable with the world we are poured on and put into. So Christian saltiness is essentially characteristics and properties that are listed in the Beatitudes in verses 2 through 12. That's not the focus of today. You can go home and read it. In fact, I really encourage it. But all those qualities are characteristics of being salty as a Christian. So for effectiveness, the Christian must retain his Christ-likeness in the same way that salt must retain its saltiness. So in order for us Christians to be effective, for us to be doing our job properly, we must be Christ-like. And that's how salt remains salty. Why do we do it? What's the importance of being a salty Christian? It is because we are given an opportunity. We have influence in and on society. And whether we actually influence it for the better or worse completely depends on us being different from the world. If I go out and say, like, you guys see me up here speaking on a Sunday, and then I go out and I live a very secular life, how's that going to make you feel? You're going to be like, oh, that guy's a scam. That guy's just out here being a hypocrite. Like, why should I listen to anything that he says if this is his real life character? That's me not doing my job as the salt of the earth. In fact, I'm tarnishing the image of God. I'm tarnishing my purpose. But, and hopefully, I probably don't see any of you guys in public, but if you guys do happen to see me, hopefully I'm doing a good deed. Not out of performance, but out of faith of trying to be more Christ-like. That would give you an impact. That would make you guys feel like, oh, maybe there is truth to what he's teaching on Sunday. And that applies to everyone that comes up here. And that applies to everyone in this room as well. You don't have to teach to be a good Christian. You don't have to teach to be faithful. You can do, as long as in your hearts you're faithful to God and you understand your role as salt of the earth, you are out there in the public, you are out there in the world, and you can radically shift someone's perspective of being Christian, of what it means to be Christ-like, of what it means to follow Christ. So, Martin Lloyd-Jones, the guy that I had in the slides earlier, emphasizes this. The glory of the gospel is that when the church is absolutely different from the world, she invariably attracts it. It is then that the world is made to listen to her message, though it may hate it at first. Otherwise, if we Christians are indistinguishable from non-Christians, we are useless. We might as well be discarded like salt, thrown out and trodden underfoot by men. So the downside, or the consequences of losing our saltiness, is that we have a missed opportunity. We limit our impact upon the world by our lack of sanctification. So going back to the light analogy, a candle, if we're out camping, I hope everyone's been camping before, but if it's pitch black and you see a light in the distance, you can see it from very, very far, especially if it's like up in like a high elevation. If you've seen fireflies, like you can see them from like miles away in some weather conditions, right? For salt, as long as it's in your food, even if it's like a little bit, it does change the taste of food. So I want us to understand that it's not whether we have, again, I keep saying this, but it's not a question of whether we got the job. You already have that role. You simply must honor it. You must take on the responsibilities of it and do your job properly and effectively. And in preparation for this message, like, I heard many sermons. And many sermons use this passage, verses 13 through 16, as like an anthem for believers to like kind of come together, to unite and say like, hey guys, this is our call to action. We must focus, we must make plans, we must strategize, we must do the next big thing to make more believers. It is used to motivate and activate Christians into like boots on the ground activism, to change the world. This passage is calling us to change the world. Yes, correct. But these verses emphasize that we change the world not firstly by what we do, not by an extrinsic action or milestone or achievement, but by what happens intrinsically in our identity and nature. We change the world primarily by who we are. I'm going to say that again. We do not change the world primarily by what we do. We change the world primarily by who we are. We change the world primarily by being more Christ-like. It is in our identity. It is in our nature. That is how we change the world. And this is a little bit of a roast, but there was once a Chinese missionary who came to America, and he went to a bunch of churches. He didn't just go to one. He was like, he saw all the strategies, saw the big congregations, saw all the worship, and it was amazing. And went back to China, and he met another American pastor, and the pastor said, hey, how did you like your trip? How was America? And this is what he said back. He said, it is amazing what the American church can do without God. It is amazing what the American church can do without God. You guys have focused so much on strategy, on performance, on the cover of the book, that you've forgotten that it is ultimately the identity of who you must be and not what you must do to change the world. That speaks volumes. And as American Chinese, I get to pick sides. But I identify as Chinese in that scenario. But truly, that is, when I heard that, I was like, man, like, yes, he's talking about the church, but in my own life, like, how much of what I do is it for appearances? Is it for performance? Maybe it's even like just routine or habit now. And it's not because I truly find fulfillment in it. And I'm not doing it because it's in my nature, it's in my faith to do it. And I thought about that a lot. As I've said, my frontal lobe has fully developed. But in verses, I want to go back to verse 13 again. It says the consequences of losing your saltiness as salt is that you are no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. And this is a commentary in response to that is, but what a downcome from being saviors of society, saviors of the world, to supplying materials for footpaths. This is like, in my analogy of the job, this is like the world's greatest demotion, okay? You had the best job in the world, and now you're thrown back into the world, and now you're just as lost and as confused as everyone else. So don't lose your job. I'm sure we've all like either heard or I think maybe even like I would say all of us have like personally experienced for ourselves the underwhelming happiness we experience after achieving something we worked really hard for. That was really wordy. I'm gonna do it like this. Okay, show of hands. Who has worked incredibly hard for something to achieve something and then actually achieved it, and then you're like, oh, I'm not as happy as I thought I'd be. Okay, How many of us have like experienced that or heard of someone experiencing it, right? Big. Basically everyone, right? This is where I go back into the science aspect, the science class, but this is something known, or maybe like in like tangent, in the same industry, in the same field, this is something known as the hedonic treadmill theory. This is like a general graph. So I'm going to explain kind of what this means. So the blue line is your standard of happiness. Like this is how much happiness you experience. And then the green that goes up is the good things that happen in your life, and the red, the bad stuff that happens in your life. So what does this mean? It means that like with every experienced moment of happiness, in theory, also comes a shift in your expectations. So that the next time you experience the same happiness again, the happiness is a little bit diminished because your expectations have changed as well. So like, actually I was going to give an example, but I'll do that later. But this might seem like a terrible like psychology ability, right? Like this seems like why on earth did humans evolve or like have this built-in like party pooper in our brains? Like it just kills the joy of like achieving something, right? And this is actually it was discovered or theorized as a coping mechanism. It's actually a self-defense mechanism, so that when you experience a bad thing, so for example, let's just talk about me bombing my first midterm. I bombed my first midterm. It was the first time I had like failed a midterm that badly, and it was my first midterm. So I wouldn't say trauma, like it wasn't that bad, but like when I got the score back, I was like, I've never seen a 3 at the first, as like my first grade, like the first digit in this 2-digit number. And I was like, man, like that hurts. It didn't happen, but I think I got like an 83 on like the next midterm. But let's just say I got like a 50 on the next midterm and I still failed. I would be less sad because I'm like, oh, okay, this is not new to me. Like, obviously, I'm trying not to build a habit of failing midterms, but if I do consistently fail midterms, like each failure hurts a little bit less because I'm like, oh, it happened that time and the other time. So it's actually a way for your brain to protect itself from being emotionally distraught in bad events, in stressful events. So that's kind of what like the good and bad side, like the double-edged sword of the hedonic treadmill theory. So this is when I give like, this is an example. So I'm not flexing here, okay? I am putting these up here, but I'm not, the purpose is not to flex. Okay, but I didn't even leave my Strava, guys. It's okay. Yes, okay, no, I do want to talk about it, okay? This was my second half marathon ever. It was Houston in 2024. I was trying to look for it, but again, Alicia does not have Strava. I unironically was looking for people to put up here, but I didn't have anyone's permission, so I wasn't sure about it. But anyways, let me get back to the topic. Okay, I have 10 minutes left. Okay, when I first ran my first marathon, I think my pace was like around like 10:30ish. Okay, and then the second time I ran it, I had improved, and then in March 1st of last year, I ran my first marathon, and since then, okay, the hedonic treadmill theory in my brain has ruined running for me a little bit. And maybe for the runners in this room, you know what I'm talking about. This is 14 miles, okay? But also this is like me after tearing my MCL, okay? But I ran 14 miles 2 weeks ago at like, honestly, a pretty slow pace, but I'm pretty happy with it given my circumstances. 9:59. Okay, dude, unironically, after I ran this, like I went home and I'm showering and I'm like, why did I only run 14? Why did I not run 20? Like, I was disappointed in the fact that I didn't run 15 miles, like a more perfect number, okay? The first time I ran a 5K, the first time I ran a mile, I was like, I'm the GOAT. Dude, I might have a career in the Olympics soon, right? I ran my first 5K, I ran my first 10K, and the first time I did it, it was a real victory. It was like, I can't believe I can do this. And then I do it again and again and again, and then like I begin to not celebrate my runs. So looking at this, like I'm like, dude, why are you unhappy with a 14-mile run? That's more than a half marathon. Like, dude, chill out. Why are you such a why are you such a party pooper, man? Like, why are you such a sweat? Yeah. Our minds, and then this is yesterday, this was yesterday. I ran 20 miles, and I was telling myself, like, okay, don't like get in your head and be disappointed in the fact that you're not like running a marathon today. It's fine to run 20. Like, I was literally having to tell myself that. And that's kind of like why I bring up the hedonic treadmill. Our minds are incredibly adaptive. What once thrills us and what once we used to count as victory becomes normal, and it gets normalized, and it might even be disappointing. So in running, like this is an analogy of being the secular world. The adaptation in my legs ultimately flattens the joy that I experience with my next run. Okay, my achievement, my happiness has recalibrated my expectations so that satisfaction ultimately never arrives. Okay. So in the secular world, I wonder if we've all felt that in some way. Maybe it's not for running. Maybe it's like video games, right? You might have been like silver 1 in league, and you worked super hard to get to gold, and then now you're maybe like a Masters player. Like, you think gold players are complete bad players, but it may be in your job. You got promoted, and now you're thinking of the next promotion, right? But when you do get it, you're happy for a little bit moment, but then you still go to work the next day, and nothing really changes, right? I wonder if deep in our souls, when we feel dissatisfied, or if we're uncomfortable, that in our subconsciousness, or whatever you want to call it, that our identity as disciples of Jesus knows that that is not our true purpose in life, and that is why we're dissatisfied. That constantly pining for the next benchmark is not our true God-given purpose in life. So I want our faith to harness God's given adaptability, but moved in a different direction. So this is the last Strava thing I'm going to show. This is my first 10K after I tore my MCL. It's 12:20, and it says 6.16. I got Strava taxed. It was actually 6.26, but my Garmin watch was like, nah, we're going to humble you today. But truly, after this run, I was incredibly happy, because before this run, I was worried I was never going to be able to do like long distance running ever again. In our Christian lives, in our Christian formation, adaptation should deepen our joy. Practice in being Christ-like should become normal without becoming empty. Our growth as Christians should produce capacity and ability without exhaustion. So I think it's fascinating that God gave us this psychological recalibration thing in our heads, but it should be used not for endless dissatisfaction. I believe that God gave it to us so that in Christ our adaptation doesn't drain our joy, it expands and deepens our capacity for it. The world trains us to raise our expectations, to strive for the next milestone, right? And it doesn't change our hearts. It only changes our attitude, right? God changes our hearts so that we can raise our expectations without losing our joy. That is what we should be using, this adaptive ability in our heads. So Christian growth is not about chasing spiritual highs, but about becoming so formed by Christ that faithfulness itself becomes our joy. So as we grow in faith, like prayer that once felt extraordinary becomes normal, obedience that once felt costly should become instinctive, not out of habit, but because it is who we are as in our nature. So unlike the hedonic treadmill, Christian growth should not leave us empty. It should leave us full. For the sake of time, I am going to go to the next slide, but I can come back. Okay. Last 3 points. There is a fundamental distinction between Christians and the world. We must understand who we are. We must dispel any resemblance of identity crisis. We are his children. We are disciples of Jesus Christ. I'm sure we all have seen colorful titles in the world. CEO, creative director, Dr. MD, PhD, whatever, right? But truly your identity, your title is salt of the earth, light of the world. Is that not a cool enough job title for you guys? Is that not a cool enough job title for us? Take a step back and think about it. That is our true job. and it should be amazing enough for you. We must carry out and accept the responsibilities that this distinction gives us. So for some of us, maybe like in the room, we're like, okay, that's a pretty big job title. I don't know if I'm ready for the job. We might be newer in our faith. We might be starting off on our journey. You may have doubts in your identity, but truly, theology and truth is all very important in our Christian journey, but being used by God depends more upon your devotion, more upon your submission than it does upon your intellect, than it does depend on your qualifications. All you have to do is submit. And lastly, we must, as salt, prevent decay, and as light, spread it. So these two work in tandem. Their effects are complementary. The function of salt is largely not negative in connotation, but negative in function. It prevents something. It prevents decay. It prevents rot. And the function of light is that it illuminates darkness and it spreads light. So rely on God. Know His word. Be light. Be salt. It is easier for me to be up here to prepare a message, to teach it on Sunday, than it is for me to actually live out what I teach. In fact, it is said about Matthew chapters 5 through 7 that the Sermon on the Mount is probably the best known part of the teaching of Jesus. It is arguably the least obeyed, and it is certainly least understood and certainly the least obeyed. So for all of us, the first thing we must do is understand that we have to rely on God. We must know His word to do our jobs properly. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful Sunday. I just pray that you opened our hearts to listen to what you had to say today, Lord. We just pray that you work in our lives, that we empty ourselves as vessels, that we become your stewards and your servants, to go out into this world to simply be who we are called to be, to live out our true purposes in our life, to be salt of the earth, the light of the world. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.